Oh, emojis. I thought the conversation just got dumber.
Ugh, internet trolls, just ignore them.
I like you just the way you are.
I believe in you.
She's a hugger. Give her a squeeze.
Help up the hand.
Ah, there you go.
Thanks, mate.
You're killing it, Jane!
Brainstorm, bringing great minds and ideas together, exploring a wide variety of opportunities, achieving academic excellence, using the latest technology, government's impact, preparing for 21st century careers, parenting and health issues, topics shaping tomorrow. Brainstorm with Lisa Willever, bringing great minds and ideas together.
Welcome to Brainstorm. I'm Lisa Willever, and today we're talking about evaluation without testing. But before we begin, let's see what's happening with this topic. Every school year, buses arrive, crossing guards cross, and children worry about their new grade. Will the work be too hard? Will they get good grades? And what if they fail? While teachers reassure their students, few people realize that student test grades are now teacher test grades. Yes, student performance, which is impacted by numerous factors that teachers cannot control, is now being used to measure our teachers. So joining me today, we have from the New Jersey Education Association, Dr. Christine Miles. Christine is the Associate Director of Professional Development and Instruction. And Steve, congratulations, you are the new Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you.
Thank you both for being here today.
Thanks for having
So
us.
let's get right into it. This topic, evaluation without testing. I'm sure kids around the country are listening right now. They are cheering, they're jumping up and down because they think this means them. But we're not talking about student evaluation for themselves with testing and eliminating it. Why don't you tell us what this topic is about?
So in New Jersey and throughout the country, there are various states that incorporate standardized test scores from students on teacher evaluation. And so we have found, and the research community has found, that that's not an accurate way to really evaluate teachers, because standardized test scores for students really do not determine whether or not the teacher was the one who caused growth or achievement for them, but rather there are many outside factors that could predict that.
That makes so much sense. How did we evaluate teachers before this movement, Steve?
Well, there's several ways to evaluate teachers and defined by different states, but it's multiple measures. It was based on peer evaluation, not peer evaluation, administrator evaluation. You had people within your buildings that would, as your supervisor, administrator, come in and observe you a number of times a year through a rigorous process of looking at your lesson plans, having meetings with the staff members, and then following up with post-conferences after these evaluations. It was a system that was designed to inform good practice, that was collaborative between the administration, having that there, of course, the board policies and how to run the district and what they wanted to see in curriculum, but allowing the teachers to do what they're hired to, and having someone that was certified be able to really help them grow.
And it seemed so much more comprehensive, and it just seemed to make sense. I taught in an urban district in the city of Trenton for about 8 years, and after I left teaching, I became a children's book author. So I visit schools all over the country, and when I walk into a school and I see a principal with a walkie-talkie, I already know they are in the classrooms regularly. So this is something, to me, that observation and interaction with the class, with the students and the teachers, that seems to have so much more evaluation. Just the metric for it is just unbelievable. And to say that we're taking a standardized test that, personally, I don't think even really adequately measures the students, then to further apply that to teachers. So I was doing some research and I saw that the current system, now is it just New Jersey that uses this, or are there other states that use this?
There are other states as well.
Okay, so for the states who are using this new system, it says one of the first elements is teacher practice score. Can you explain that to me?
So a teacher practice score is determined by the administrator actually coming into the classroom and observing a lesson.
Okay.
Right now in New Jersey, over the past year, it was changed to 2 20-minute observations for tenured teachers, and then 3 20-minute minimum observations for non-tenured teachers. Okay. So a teacher is working with his or her students for much more time across a school year than a mere 40 minutes. And that's all that can be really seen in many cases. And so they're evaluated on their performance with students. It might be just the first 20 minutes of a lesson or the final 20 minutes of a lesson in some cases. And the evaluation tools that are used are not designed for that. They're designed to see a full picture and not just a snapshot, but really that whole photo album that you have throughout the year. So it's really a faulty design. And so those 2 or 3 observations then result in a teacher practice score.
Okay. How do you feel about this?
I don't like it. Listen, before...
Be honest.
Before I became secretary treasurer of NJA, I'm a classroom teacher. I've taught 24 years of high school social studies, okay. Bridgewater Raritan High School in Somerset County, so I think I know a little bit about what it means to try to fully evaluate someone. We're not test scores, we're not numbers. You can't fully evaluate what someone does in a 10-minute period of time. You work on crafting a lesson, taking hours sometimes, nuancing certain things, that the anticipatory set that you open with is just as important as the closure you get later on. And for an administrator to come in and sit there for a piece of that and try to tease out whatever they think that belongs on a rubric that somehow fits into a box, goes against everything that good teaching should be. It doesn't inform anything about the process. It doesn't help anyone to grow because you're not seeing what the full breadth and scope of what that teacher is doing in terms of all the things that go into that piece of time.
Now, these new methods of evaluation, where are they coming from? Is this federal? Who came up with this idea?
So there are various different individuals who come up with the designs. And so in the state of New Jersey, we have a handful of major evaluation tools that are used. So we have Marzano, Danielson, Strong, McCrell, and then districts can also create their own tool as well that has to have a certain number of criteria and meet the standard that the State Department determines. And so we have these various models in place, and what we've found is another issue is that depending on what model a district uses, a teacher could score completely differently on their teacher practice. So if you have a lesson in your classroom and we use Danielson, you might have 1 score. But then if we use Strong, you might have a completely different score.
So it's nice and consistent.
It's not at all.
Great, that's awesome. Because as a parent, I'm happy to see that the teachers who teach my children and everyone else's children are being evaluated fairly.
It's very frustrating throughout the state, and it's not fair to say that someone who may be considered effective or highly effective using one model could be partially effective or even ineffective using another model, because then there's just not a consistent vision of what we expect for our educators throughout the state.
And there's so many inconsistencies within the system itself between rater to rater reliability, and you have people using the same models. That's another big problem, how these things were designed in the first place. And even goes back further to when the State Governors Association came back with what they believe should be the Common Core. So you're trying to tie everyone to one single kind of type of curriculum, and then find accountability from that. Again, we're not teaching, we're not making products. These are students that we're teaching, and we're hired to do a job and be treated as professionals. And these systems that are in place don't allow that to take place.
Well, if you ask my children, they will tell you. They could probably give this little speech I give all the time. They hear me complain about it so much, but the fact that it's kind of like business and politics against the art of teaching. And I tell my kids and anybody who will listen to me, it could be at a restaurant, at a mall, if I hear somebody talk about education, I'm compelled to tell them that teaching it's an art. It is not a science. We're not an assembly line. And teachers are college-educated professionals who are trained in that art of disseminating information to a room filled with different learners who are all having a different day. I remember somebody said, it must be hard because your class changes year to year. And I said, year to year? They change minute by minute. Who's hungry, who's sleepy, who's having problems at home, who's in a fight right now. Did a snowflake fall? I mean, anything can tip the balance in the classroom. And to find out that an administrator can come in and spend such a brief, as you call it, a snapshot, it doesn't seem very fair. And it doesn't seem like it's in the best interest of the students to have different rubrics and different programs, and it sounds so subjective. So I guess seemed like the best part of this whole evaluation system, because the next two, from when I visit schools, I hear about these a lot, is the SGO. So I try not even to say that word in schools because people are so frustrated by them.
They get angry.
And they're angry.
Sure.
And when I visit some schools every year, I'll say, oh, where's Mrs. So-and-so? And they'll say, she left, she couldn't take it anymore. So we're losing amazing, talented veteran teachers who aren't just retiring, they're fleeing because it's just, they see the nonsense and they don't see any hope of this going away anytime soon. So that's why I'm happy you're here to tell my viewers what this is about. So who wants to explain SGOs? Hey.
I've had them, so I mean, I can describe them in many different ways, but more specifically, it's a way again to measure student growth in theory. That as an individual teacher, I might have an SGO. Basically, you're setting a statistical benchmark. You're going to say that in a certain way to test students, that let's say 80% of my students will reach some kind of benchmark on a specific assessment set. 80% of my students will achieve a 75% or above on a specific benchmark, and you chart it from beginning to end. And at the end of it, you say, okay, well, how many students met that benchmark? And depending on that number, you get a score assigned to you. You had this many make it, this many go over that, this many, so you're effective by this many having done it, or you're highly effective, or you're partially effective in that particular area because your students did or did not meet what you set as, we hope, is a meaningful but sometimes arbitrary number of where they should be achieving on that particular assessment.
And you know what the funny thing is, when I go to baseball games or soccer games for my children and I talk to other parents, I'm the person who goes up and says, what do you think about SGOs? Just because I want to see, do people understand what they are? And the majority of people support student government organizations. So most parents don't even understand what teachers are dealing with in the classroom. And everything you just described sounded like a way to check parts coming down at a car assembly line, at a plant somewhere. 80% of the products should be make it, and we'll have some defects. These are people we're talking about, and children no less. And I can't understand why somebody thought making random percentages and assigning these things. I mean, it's paperwork too. What's the paperwork like?
So the paperwork load for student growth objectives is incredibly overwhelming. In discussions that we've had with different educators throughout the state and in our own experiences, we've seen 8+ hours as the average for the workload that it takes just to complete the paperwork, not to conduct the lessons and make sure that students are growing and check formatively to see where you might need to adjust along the way, but rather just the paperwork completion, which doesn't have an impact on the students. And so I think the intention behind the development of an SGO is for an individual teacher to know his or her impact on his or her kids. And there's different ways to do that, and we don't have to spend such an exorbitant amount of time on paperwork, but rather we could be working side by side with colleagues and analyzing student work and seeing where Johnny might be doing really well, but he still needs some help in this area, so we're going to refine our instruction to make sure that we're meeting those just-in-time needs, as opposed to, here's a baseline test, here's where Johnny performed, and by the end of the year, he's got to hit this mark in order to meet a standard that in many cases could be arbitrary. And what we're finding throughout the state as well is that's supposed to be a process that the individual teacher comes up with in collaboration with his or her administrator. But what is happening is that administration is generally saying you have to have an achievement score of X in order to get an effective score on your SGO, as opposed to looking at where students are really starting and making an appropriate professional judgment about where they should grow. And growth and achievement are two different things.
You know what, on that note, we're going to take a break because this is getting very good, and I want to make sure that my viewers know there's another one after SGOs. We'll be right back.
Everything starts out small. The things that hurt us, they all start from somewhere. The words we say, the things we do, they can grow into something else. What was small and innocent can become big and sometimes scary. All it takes is one comment, one picture, one video for something to catch fire. But a big problem doesn't need a big response. Not at first. Even if we don't know what to say, the eye emoji can be that first step we take. Let's all pledge to take that first small step together and change the world in a big way. I'm a witness, and so are you.
We just finished dinner and it was time for homework. He hates homework. I know he's bright.
Why is it so hard for me?
He's just gotta try a little harder.
1 in 5 children struggle with learning and attention issues. Go from misunderstanding to understood.org.
Welcome back to Brainstorm. I'm Lisa Willever, and I'm joined by the New Jersey Education Association's Dr. Christine Miles and Steve Beatty, and we're talking about evaluation without testing. When we left off, we were talking about student growth objectives, something that's not very popular with a lot of people in the educational field, only because they see what it's doing to education. We just talked about all the paperwork. How does this relay to parents? Does any of this information gathered go directly to the parents? Is it useful?
It generally doesn't make its way to the parents. Sometimes you may have individual educators who are talking about what kind of growth they've seen in the students with parents at conferences and whatnot, but not in terms of, here's where your child performed in terms of my student growth objective. But they will be talking about overall growth that they're seeing with individual children, and that's generally not aligned to a specific test. It's more of the day-to-day formative
observations,
moments.
right? And what the teacher sees from the work, from the participation.
Exactly.
When did all that stop counting? Projects and classwork, homework, and all these different things that were well-rounded. I mean, I'm not against testing in the sense that I think testing is a part of student assessment. A part, not the part. I mean, my kids, they're taking benchmarks constantly, and it's eaten up so much of their school year, and they're in not just the test time, but the instruction leading up to it. It's
and that's the real tragedy here in so many cases. And again, as a classroom teacher, I know that myself, you have to change your work, your lesson planning, things that you've worked for a long time to refine. As you mentioned, projects, things that get the students involved, cooperative lessons and learning, and yet you see, okay, well now I realize that coming into April and May, or March and April, there's going to be a week taken up for park assessment. And it's not just the assessment itself. As you said, it's the lead up to that. So, well, I can't do that project because those 3 days the students are going to be taking a test. And I can't introduce that new curriculum because we have to prepare for this. So it really comes back to the tragedy of a standardized assessment taking over everything else. And this drive towards some kind of false sense of accountability that takes away from what makes education, especially New Jersey, where we rank in the top 5 of every measurable category of student success, and saying, that's not right, let's do something else.
So we're fixing something that wasn't broken, and we're fixing it with something that the people who are on the front line, the teachers, are they brought in on these decisions? Do they say to them, hey, do you think this will work? Because if I worked at the Department of Education, that's where I would want to get my information, from the people who are in the classrooms. When I was a waitress, the best boss I ever had, putting my way through college, best boss ever was someone who, she was a dishwasher, she was a short line cook, she was a hostess, she did every job there. So she knew what it was like in everybody's position, and it was the best boss I ever had. I wish teachers had more input. Now I know there's another, I hate to even say it, there's another portion here, the median student growth percentile. Do I want to know?
That's the worst one.
Oh, good. We saved the best for last.
So the MSGP is a measure that is assigned to specific teachers. So if you're a 4th through 7th grade math teacher or a 4th through 8th grade language arts teacher, you receive an MSGP score in addition to the other areas for your annual evaluation rating. And the way that an MSGP is calculated is if I'm an individual student and I score whatever I score 1 year on the test, and then different students around the state who score similarly to me, I'm compared with their growth from 1 year to the next. So it's not just all of the students in one building or anything like that. It's comparing to students who are in similar testing situation, their testing result from one year to the next. And so then those numbers are calculated for an individual teacher's roster, and they take the median. So the research community has come out saying, the American Statistical Association has come out saying that value-added measures, which an MSGP is a value-added measure, is not an appropriate...
You're generous with the word value, right? Yes. Very loose.
It's not appropriate for teacher evaluation because it's not causal. It doesn't say that because a teacher did X, Y, and Z, this student has grown from here to here. There are so many outside factors that come into play. Poverty, whether you have books in the home, whether your parents may have the opportunity to get outside tutors for you, all sorts of different factors. So it's correlation, it's not causation, so it's inappropriate to measure a teacher's performance.
Well, I know when I taught in an urban setting, you mentioned poverty, and poverty is not, a lot of people think poverty is how much money you have. When you're a child living in poverty, this affects every single aspect of your life, from what you eat and what you don't have to eat, what kind of medical treatment you receive and the treatment you don't receive, your clothing. Do you have a windbreaker for a cold northeast day, or do you have a regular winter coat and boots? And the resources, and then also the experiences. Kids who don't live in poverty go to museums and they go to history places, and they spend time and they have these experiences that these other children don't have. And we don't account for that when we measure a student or a teacher. That's not there. It's kind of like an invisible. I wrote a book called T-Bone Takes a Stand for Public Schools. I wrote it a couple years ago. It's part of the Nikki Fifth series. And the reason I put that in as a subtopic was I wanted my readers, who are 3rd through 6th graders, to start understanding what poverty was. And I wanted, even though they're humorous chapter books, I wanted my characters to meet a foster child and a mom who, between her and her husband, they're working 4 jobs and they barely get to see their kids. I wanted my young readers to be exposed to this, to know that this is happening. And what I guess from all my years of teaching, I came to the realization that the 3 things that, in my opinion, matter most in education are not benchmarks and standardized tests and SGOs and MSGs, and that it's actually parents, priorities, and poverty. These are the 3 things, in my opinion, that impact student growth more than anything. Are the parents there? Are they involved? Do they make education, something that's important to the whole family, not just to the child, but to the whole family? And is it a priority? Is it sports or is it your homework? Like, which one comes first in the family? And then it's the poverty aspect. And I don't see how any of this addresses what's really happening. It seems more like business and politics need neat numbers so that they can say this went up 3%, or these scores improved, but it doesn't seem real. None of it seems real. Do you agree with any of that?
I do. I agree completely with that. That's exactly it. I mean, you said before, and we're teaching students. We're forming these early relationships that go beyond the classroom in many cases, which students are going to become parts of society. And you try to measure what teachers do in some quantitative way. Doesn't work. It's not the industry that we're in. And you said, what do they have for breakfast? Do they have parents that support them? What sets the stage for being able to come to school to learn, and then of course the impact that has, and looking to measure teachers on that. We're the ones that see them perhaps more than their parents do.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Is there a solution? Like, what do you think? What would be a great solution to this if you could change it right now?
If I could change teacher evaluation, I would make it more of a reflective process where professionals, educators as professionals, are able to really see where they stand in terms of their own self-assessment and make some collaborative decisions with their colleagues and some partnerships with their colleagues to say, okay, I really need some help with behavior management. And so Steve's doing a great job. He's my colleague down the hall. Can I come in and check out your classroom? Can we work on a behavior management plan together? And we could support one another through it. And maybe then I'm going to test some things out in my classroom in a non-threatening way where there's not going to be someone coming in and with a checklist saying, oh, well, this isn't working, and then I have to play it safe and not do something that really could impact my kids in a positive way, because it's just a little bit too unsure.
So you mean treat teachers like the professionals, the college-educated professionals that they are?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, accountants don't have people coming over their shoulder and say, like, let me see how you add that number.
Right.
Let me see you use that calculator.
Right. And I would also make sure that there are some, a system in place so that our brand new teachers have the ability to get the support that they need, as opposed to being held to the same standard as a 20-year veteran.
That's a great point.
Because we're seeing so many of our early career educators leave the profession because they don't have the support that they need. And we're the only profession that throws somebody in head first and says, you got to be perfect on day one.
And my daughter's studying to be a teacher right now, and I was kind of on the fence, you know, and I loved education. I loved teaching. Love the students, but I was nervous for her because I said, I don't know where it's going right now. And, you know, I gave her my blessing. She was going to do it anyway, she's a teenager, but in hopes that it will reverse itself, that, you know, it will have the pendulum will swing back to, you know, sanity. So on the word of sanity, let's play a game called Brainstorm.
All right.
So this is where we go and have a little fun. We are going to do, in the tradition of brainstorming, some idea evaluation. No SGOs. So I'm going to give you, we have 8 ideas. I'll give you an idea. If you think it's a good one, we keep it. If it's not, you guys can fight over who balls it up and throws it in the basket. No pressure. People all over the country are watching to see your balling skills here. You ready? Idea number 1, student scores accurately measure teacher effectiveness.
No.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Go ahead, you take the first shot.
All right.
80% of my shots will find 75% of the basket. Is that?
Oh my God, I thought that went in. That went in. That did. There. Oh, there it is. Okay. Standardized tests are the only fair way to evaluate students.
No. We have opportunities to really evaluate students on authentic performance as opposed to a biased standardized test that's not valid or reliable.
Yep.
Kids all over the country are cheering.
That went in too.
That went in. Idea 3, the massive paperwork load has taken away from instruction and preparation.
That is
Most
true.
certainly has.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay, we'll
cases
keep
all
that
over
one.
the place of that.
And from the teachers who've left, we'll say that's one of the reasons they left. Idea 4, high stakes testing and anxiety builds character in elementary school students.
No.
We don't see as one of the pillars of character education is not high stakes
There we
testing.
go.
For sure.
And anxiety.
Right.
Yeah.
Idea 5, the value of a teacher cannot be reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet.
Yes.
Okay, let's move that one over here. Student interaction and growth is the best indicator of effectiveness.
Student interaction and growth.
It could be one indicator of effectiveness.
Very good.
I don't know if we want to say best.
That's best.
Okay, one of.
But definitely
All right.
one.
Assessment for learning is more important than assessment of learning.
Yes.
I
So
agree,
that's the way that we
100%.
really know whether or not what we're doing is making a positive impact on
If
our
it's
kids.
working.
And that's
Very
what a
good.
system should do. It should look to see inform that kind of paradigm.
All right, last one. Standardized test scores are a valid measure of teacher performance.
Oh, should we get a lighter? Which
All
is
right. Smoke codes.
I think we covered that topic really well.
There we go. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want to thank Dr. Christine Miles and Steve Beatty from the New Jersey Education Association. This is something that affects every state in our country, so call your Department of Education with what you learned today and start using your voice. I'm Lisa Willever. We'll see you next time on Brainstorm.
Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Yeah, I get it.
Patriotism. It inspires passionate debate. It's worn like a badge of honor with good reason, because it means love and devotion for one's country. But what really makes up this country of ours? It's the people. To love America is to love all Americans. This year, patriotism shouldn't just be about pride of country. It should be about love. Love beyond age, sexuality, disability, race, religion, and other labels. Because love has no labels.
They call me Maxie, but I prefer tripod. I was your above-average four-legged homie, and then wham, bam, minivan. Some people pity me. Now that's lame. I still run, fetch, and swim. And the ladies love me. I'm the ultimate wingman. Just don't ask me to high five.